Hey, I'm Don Rarick from Rain Engineering here with Manufacturing Know-How on YouTube today. We're going to talk a little bit with my buddy and partner, Chris Carlins, today about how MES actually works on the plant floor. Hey, Chris, how are you doing today?
Hey, great to be here, Don. Doing well.
Good. Hey, you've been doing a lot of plant visits and helping customers think about, talk about their MES, their existing MES lately. And it's caused us to have a lot of internal conversations about what MES, like how does it really work on the plant floor? And let's have a conversation about that today.
Yeah, it could have two parts to it, right? One of them is just all the different types of manufacturing that there is under one roof, right? Like there's the ability to make continuous product as it's streaming off onto a conveyor and maybe forming or something like that. And then every place has got some kind of high speed discrete, right? You got all these little bits that you want to package up. You're cutting things, you're stamping things or whatever, and so you're looking for that way of doing continuous, just high speed discrete. Maybe you're also doing some CNC things or whatever, and so you're making some larger parts. So that falls under the umbrella of all the different types of manufacturing components there are. But really, what we're eyes are open to is like once you pick out a technology like in MES, you say this is going to be the right one, and Prophecy certainly is a right one because it has all the different types of manufacturing ready to be represented. But how do you make it come to life?
Yeah, I used to think that the fact that we get to go into and see how everything's made in different manufacturing facilities was all the fun, but it's actually not. It's actually when you are able to make a difference. You
Gotcha.
know, so last week you were with a client. What types of manufacturing did that client have? And
Yeah, it's similar to anything in the paper industry, right? Where you and this is where Prophecy Plant Applications was born. And you can have a continuous process where you're pouring stuff out and letting it form, or even like turning pulp into paper. It's this continuous thing. You're just continuously throwing raw materials in. You're mixing it up. You're putting it to a certain consistency and then pushing it out onto a long conveyor, either to dry or whatever else. And so that's the continuous part of the manufacturing process a lot of the time. And then as it's forming, you might want to cut, either put it into smaller rolls or cut it into large sheets or whatever it is. You might have some secondary parts of your process that you want it to do. You need to put it through a long oven, maybe even for food and beverage, right? You got to um, make sure your pastries are baking and all that kind of stuff. So all of that is part of the processing side and really going through the continuous process. You might even have some batching at the beginning where you're doing that mixing before it goes out onto the line. And then that final part is usually with packaging. You have some high speed discrete, right? You're getting them into packages, you're cutting them to smaller sizes. So that's three, and then you have to put them onto like a pallet or something like that. So you're getting back into that idea of not so much a batch. In Prophecy, we call it a production event so that it can be generic and be very flexible. Those are all the things that you would find just on a line at many manufacturing sites. And we didn't even get into, Don, the idea of discrete, which is really more of the world that you lived in. If you want to chat about that one for a second.
growing up in discrete automotive and tier one suppliers, I think, especially like metal shaping, there you have some sort of a casting or raw material or steel bar coming in, and a machine tool that applies tooling to it and transforms that part, and then it goes to another machine tool that cuts a different profile, and then those parts get sent to an assembly line and consumed on the assembly line. And you can even talk about like the serialization and genealogy, tracking parts and tracing, getting into genealogy and being able to track that part back to the bar or the group of bars that it came in, from a steel standpoint, and or the casting or the batch of castings that came in from a third-party supplier.
Yeah.
Through the machining process, delivered to the line side, assembling the parts, having a complete transmission, going into mated up with an engine, getting a VIN number, getting into a car, cool stuff. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes entire transmission is machined and assembled in a single plant, and sometimes there's multiple suppliers that bringing in the sun gears and different pieces. Certainly, there's diverse number of suppliers that supply casting and raw materials and that sort of thing. So, plus keeping track of who's doing what.
In the discrete world of work orders, route management, knowing what operation the set of material is at as it's moving through, who's doing it, how long they were working on it, tests they need to do. That's another type of manufacturing that now Prophecy Plan Applications has. And
one example I always think of is we were at a transmission factory many years ago, and there was a machining line where a fork truck pulled up with a big bin of steel parts, just bars basically, and the bar would get put on a conveyor by an operator. The conveyor would go into the machine would automatically load the part. And then when it went through 2 or 3 operations, at the end of the line, the operator would pull every so many parts, sometimes all of them, off and measure them and then plot it on a chart on a physical piece of paper with a pencil. Like every hour, every half hour, every 20 parts, he would measure his parts out. And that when we were helping them deploy MES, I asked what happens to those logbooks, and I said every now and then a quality guy comes along and looks at those plots and does some sort of SPC analysis on it, and maybe he asks the operator to make a change or whatever. But for the most part, those pages get stapled together for the week and put in a file cabinet somewhere and kept for a couple of years, and you just go, oh man, this is a great opportunity for those SPC or those quality readings that are in process to generate alarms, to notify people, to really do what MES is built for in discrete anyway. But
yeah, he's that quality person's doing that job of SPC, which is statistical process control, and the other part of it, is that helps keep it in line. But rather than taking the time of that expertise and labor to do that, not only is it taking the time where an MES could just do that automatically, but also it could be more real time, to your point, where the operator could be alerted to it much quicker.
Yeah, it's super cool.
And the idea of the dead end paper trail, right? Like you said, you're stapling all the stuff, you're throwing in the filing cabinet and never to be seen again. Whereas you could probably come up with better standards. You could, tighten up those specs or sometimes loosen them depending on what you need. Also help with preventative maintenance as opposed to reactive maintenance. Or just, polling maintenance where you're just like, I don't know if it needs to be done or not. Just do it every so often. So now we got downtime. Those are all examples that if instead of it being on paper, you could have it in a database, you could perform a lot more of those types of analysis on it.
Yeah, it's super cool. Then so that's a case where they weren't using MES, at least not in that way at that customer. But last week you were with a customer that has deployed MES, and they're kind of early in the phases of that, but they contacted us because they're not quite getting what they expected from their MES deployment, and just wanted some counsel from us. And you and some of the team went out and what kind of things did you observe from if you called this a near miss for MES, what kind of things did you observe that were a struggle for that client?
Yeah, it was one of these situations where you were talking earlier that it's neat that you can just go into a place and it's neat to see how they do stuff, but also to do some problem solving and have that curiosity to say, how can things be done better, right? And really what they had was that core MES in place. It had all the components, but it was falling short in a couple of different ways. And I think on some level that's normal. I'm coming up with this idea of, everyone has continuous improvement. I'm thinking about continuous implementation. As people, you try to design the system with the process experts that work at the plant, and people look at it for a while and they say, yeah, that's okay, but this is what we need out of it now that we actually see it in use, right? So let's implement again. So come up to some of the problems that are there. The data entry was a problem because it was looking at all the data all at once as opposed to directing the operator to say, enter in this information. And there's some out of the box screens that Prophecy has now that we can use, or Rain Engineering can just, whip up a real quick small interface for them to purpose built enter information. And so that helps the operators know what they need to do when they need to do it. It helps reduce mistakes There were a couple places where in the design, if an operator made a mistake, it was a multi-hour fix.
I think we've seen a lot of MESs that are designed very well if everything goes perfectly. If
Yeah,
the
happy.
process works the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
We have one customer, any time that it was running in full automation all day, inventory was right, production data was right. And any time that any one of the stations was taken out of automatic for any reason, they discovered that there were errors in the system,
Variability.
and backing the variability, and there is not often enough thought put into, well, what if a mistake is made? How do we back this out?
Yeah, exactly. The happy path is always nice, but then there's all the mitigation, and some of it can't really fully be appreciated until you're in those situations. And that's where that continuous implementation comes
Yeah.
in, right? Being ready and on your toes and ready to say, okay, we know something's going to hit, we know something's going to need to be changed and take some problem solving. And that just being ready for that, I think, is important.
Yeah, I think even customers that we engage now who are looking at MES for the first time recognize that more than ever, the likelihood that their process or the way they do things in the plant is going to change. And so they think more about, well, if I select an MES and we do an implementation, how do I make sure that it remains flexible when we change how we do things? How do we make sure the system can grow and change with us? And so
Yeah.
that's encouraging that more and more people who are purchasing tools like MES don't just believe this is going to solve the problem. This is a tool,
Yeah.
and it's actually a toolkit, and they need lots of tools in the toolkit, and the tools that are in the kit may even need to change over time.
Mhm.
And so it's a important
Yeah.
thing to be thinking about.
It's true in the sense that, especially with an MES, it's about an iterative process. You want to let it grow. Like just what I was saying, as people see what it can do, they realize more of what it can do. And then you have the process experts come in from the manufacturing side and say, hey, what else can it do? Right. And that's happening at the place we're at now, where they're saying, okay, what's that next level of improvements that we can do? And they're turning in to the idea of looking at all the information they have and putting a layer of quality on top of that. And so there's the idea of building more modular functionality into it, using all the tools that you purchase to come to life and actually help your facility. But there's also those smaller things you were mentioning, like just maybe new products are introduced, new challenges, just being brought in with the day-to-day stuff, and new ways of using those tools. Like it's fine that you're collecting downtime and waste, but how are different ways that you can analyze that information as a team and then broadcast that out to the doers, to the operations team, to say, here's how we're going to go from having this many issues per week down to a smaller amount, right? So
Yeah.
the different continuous improvement initiatives that can happen, but that's not the software doing it. That's coaches doing it. That's the continuous improvement teams doing it, and empowering them to do that as well.
It's awesome, and the people are the most important part. The second most important part is choosing a technology that doesn't box you in. In all these cases, we talked about customers who've selected Prophecy, and how fortunate is that? Because when you start talking about industry-specific MES, you lose the flexibility. You lose the number of tools in the toolkit. And sometimes it becomes shelfware. It only works for a certain group of people in a certain part of the plant.
And it hit me like a lightning bolt one day. I'm like, what is it about this software that makes it good? Why am I still here? And it is such a powerful engine. And
Mhm.
it doesn't have the flashy screens to bring you in right away back in the day, right? But it had a powerful engine. It could collect all the information that you need out of any situation. And that's because exactly the idea, when you're buying these more like very specific softwares that have the flashy screens, it's like somebody needed something, they built it for them, it made it perfect for their particular use case, and they go, hey, why
Mhm.
don't we productize this? So they have all these flashy screens, they're modern. And the problem is because that software was built for a specific customer or a specific sub industry, and now they want to build it out to a larger group. As long as you fit exactly what they did originally, then you're golden. But what about
Yeah, right.
the variety of that? What is different and unique about your site? And that's where they start running into problems. Plant applications just coincidentally was built out of the paper industry, and it has all of these different manufacturing types we're talking about. So yeah, it really came from that standpoint of let's build something that's versatile, and then we'll be here for you, whatever you need it to be.
Yeah, it's an exciting part of the investment that GE Vernova made over years, of the last couple of years in the product, and that Velodic will now continue, right? Velodic Prophecy investment is likely to be very significant. And it's gotten a ton more user friendly. It's gotten a ton more flexible from a configuration and integration standpoint, and just super fantastic. Exciting time to be a part of watching this technology grow. We've been talking about the different types of manufacturing and how things really work in a plant and how MES really works in a plant. And, I look forward to having more conversations about this, but the message we want people to take home is avoid shelfware, avoid rolling out industry specific MES. If you need flexibility, if you have different manufacturing types in your plant, then consider a more flexible tool, like Velodic Prophecy MES. And if you want it implemented in such a way that it's a valuable and flexible ongoing toolkit, then consider Rain Engineering for your implementation partner. So, hey, listen, this has been another great episode of Manufacturing Know-How on YouTube. Leave comments below. And, if you need some help, visit our website at raineng.com and click on the schedule an appointment button with us, and you'll get direct contact to us. And we can take 30 minutes to talk about what you have going on in your plant. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, right? Hey, Chris, it's been great having you again. I look forward to our next talk, and we'll see everybody on the flip side.